All right, welcome in everybody. 5 minutes with Sean, maybe 10 on another beautiful, beautiful morning here. I'm excited for today's show. Normally, I don't get excited about bureaucracy, guidelines, and bullshit, but when you do it with friends, it makes it all the easier. So in case you don't know, the panelists joining me today, we have first Mr. Tom Kline. Tom, how are you, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Sean. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Always
and I would be shocked if you didn't know who our next guest was. You must live under a rock. The one, the only, Miss April Simmons. April, how are you?
Fantastic. Thanks for this show, and I'm excited to spread the news, spread the word, and help bring the industry together.
We need it around this topic because, like I told the both of you, I think before it even went live, I had a serious concern about whose problem this was. And it turns out I was kind of right. And it really is boiling down to a dealer function. But every time a dealer like April Simmons asks a vendor, like, I don't know, any of them, where they stand, she gets some bullshit reply. It's either a legalese, 2.5 paragraphs. But if you know April, you know that ain't going to work. So then she goes and digs in. So April, from a dealer's perspective, talk to me about month 1 of the FCC regulation game.
So very interesting. This is not new. This has been, years in the coming. So this isn't like a shock and all of a sudden this just happened, in the middle of June and everyone's like, oh, I didn't know this was going to happen. We've known and known and known for a very long period of time. In fact, the original deadline was in December and the can got kicked. So everyone should have, in all reality, that can got kicked last minute. So there's no rhyme or reason that by December, people weren't really ready to go and gearing up for this. So when it came time to say, okay, we have all of our technical stuff done. I got my book, we're doing all the things. It gets down to this one section, which is what I'm really passionate about today, which is the vendor management section. And part of the guidelines in this rule is that we must take reasonable steps to select and retain service providers that are capable of maintaining appropriate safeguards for protecting customer information. We have to obligate said service providers through contract to implement and establish such safeguards.
According to the government, that is what's written. This is what is required of this regulation.
And I'm taking this verbiage just so that I always say where I'm taking this verbiage from. The NADA Management Series, the Dealer's Guide to the FTC Safeguards Rule. Okay, so that's right where I'm taking this from. The second thing we must do is implement, we also have to assess your service providers based on the risks they present and the continued adequacy of their safeguards. That means you have to take steps to ensure that those providers are adhering to everything. Now, here's where the big question comes into the mix. What is a service provider, right? And in reading the legal law and talking to a plethora of people, I've come to the realization that there are 3 funnels of whom thinks they're a service provider or not. And we'll get into that in a second. But what I want to start with is my big beef. There are a plethora of vendors that know there is no gray area. They are 100% part of this, right?
They are submitting leads. They are selling
access to a DMS, right? If you have a direct access link to a DMS or a CRM at any dealership, I am talking to you, you know 100% that you are required to adhere to this, right? We'll get to the other questionable ones in a moment, but these people know that they are supposed to do this. Now, here's where I'm frustrated. We always want to talk about dealers and vendor partners, right? And I have friends who get real feisty about that word. But the reality of it is I do look to my vendor partners to help and assist. So here's where the real frustration comes into play. If the vendors know that this should happen.
Let's put an emphasis on the assist part, right, April? Okay.
Yeah. I think she's about to get.
Well, April and I have had a few conversations about this, so
Yes.
I just want to tee this up right for you, April.
Yeah,
Right?
This is where failure. If I had a button for an alarm that says failure, this is it. I'm now reaching out to my reps, the only people I know to reach out to try to figure out who is going to sign the contract and who is going to do the assessment. The two things that, as I just stated, are requirements. These people know nothing. So they're helping, right? They're digging, they're calling, they're reaching out to their people. That is crap. That is crap. Vendors, I do not understand why, if you know this has to be done, you have not sent out a memo to all of your dealer-facing reps to say, reps, please advise your dealer that this is where they need to send the contract and this is where they need to send the assessment, and we are happy to take care of that for them. Every dealer has to do this. We're all in the throes of it. Why is it being so difficult? The amount of emails per vendor that I'm having to deal with just to try to find the person to actually help me is absolutely uncalled for. So my feistiness is not to be like, mad about anything. I just don't understand when we've all known this was coming for years. Most of them know that they need to do something. The lack of communication on who the person is that we need to be reaching out to is my number one core beef. Vendors, get it together and help your dealers through this. This is a massive uphill battle for them to get through all of this. We're just looking for your assistance in getting to the finish line.
Yeah, you use the word assist, and you're totally right. And then so Tom, when you, from your perspective, right, the way I'm sure you have been dealing with this as much as anyone, April's perspective of assist, as you said, don't you believe that? And I think when you and I talked about this, I felt like the vendors had to have a plan. They don't have one. Isn't this sort of shifting to them having to have a better sort of a plan to deal with this because of what April is saying?
Well, April is being generous because some of the emails that she shared with me and that I've seen from other dealers, I would call it obfuscation. They're just trying to not deal with the issue at all. And some of these are the largest vendors in the space. I'm not naming any names, and nor is April, unless April wants to. But some of these are the largest names in the business who provide leads, who just send a bunch of words on a page that say that they don't need to comply. That's where it starts. They're saying they don't need to comply. And then we have to push back and say, you do need to comply. But just to tell you the kind of level of silliness that this has, and I don't know another word off the top of my head, but I have a vendor. I was at a dealer client yesterday and we were reviewing various parts of this, and he bought his compliance software from a vendor he already uses. I'm not mentioning the vendor, but we went to look at the vendor management piece of that software yesterday. And this particular company has another division. This is like a small part of what they do, is to provide software. Well, we went on the vendor compliance part, and there is their company inside their software showing as non-compliant.
I mean, people, this is like
my shock face. This is my shock face.
This is what I'm talking about, though, Tom. Like there's just this idea of lack of preparation. You know what I mean? Like April said, this got kicked down the can like November 28th from a December 15th guideline. So it's not like anyone was like, yeah, don't worry, it's going to get kicked. We'll deal with it later. So then let's assume they kicked it in December. Preparation should have began. So when we began reaching out on behalf of our clients to vendors, we get the same thing. I know a lot of great reps in this place, and even some high level guys who are like, I don't know, Sean. I gotta go digging around, find somebody, and then all of a sudden I just get, like I said, 2 paragraphs from general counsel that we are following guidelines. We are, but hold on, you're not.
They're
because
not.
if you were, then you'd be accepting of April and the many other dealers who have lined up asking you for your assessments, for your POCs, so that they can do what they need to do. I mean, look, we're not a big company. But for our clients, we look in their CRM. We don't go into personal client data. We are literally only allowed to look at reports. Guess what? We did this. We filled it out. My team went through the assessment, like 40 questions or whatever. And they're like, dude, is this necessary? Yes, it is necessary. If the client asks us to do it, we're going to do it. So you want to call it silliness. I want to call it lack of preparation and bullshit, because what's happening is that these guys don't want to spend the money, and I don't know what money's involved, and I don't really give a shit because they make plenty of it. So even the biggest, baddest animals in our place, they don't have a plan. They don't have a plan. Yet here's my dealers who need to be buttoned up and perfect so they don't get fined. So this is, to me, a big, big watershed moment for that relationship. So much so that April has, I don't know if she wants me to say this, but I'm going to say it. She has gone back on the idea of vendors being partners to her. This has ruined her feeling on that. April, how are the vendors going to make this right in your world? What is happening now? Because you've been through some general counsels, you've been through some outsourced counsels. I mean, you have talked to a lot of people. What's changing right now for dealers they should be aware of? Have they established any POCs? Are there anything dealers can know as of now to go attack?
No. And that's the part that's so extremely frustrating. So, going back to this 3 funnels real quick, just so to clarify that. So when you go and you read the verbiage on what is a service provider, there are 3 different ideas on who constitutes as technically a service provider under the law. And here's the part that I don't like, Sean. Based on everyone I've talked to, they basically have said there is no way that we'll be able to really determine what a service provider is until 2 or 3 dealers are actually fined. In which case they can say, oh, you were fined because of this, so now we can officially say this. And I'm like, okay, well then from a dealer who doesn't want to get caught up in that, I'm saying I'm going to go with the most aggressive funnel 3, right? Like, let's go with what is the case over here. So let's talk about that for a second. Funnel number 1, no question about it, no way you're getting past this. If you have direct access to a CRM or a DMS, you must comply. If that is you, stop what you're doing now. Go talk to your upper management, find out who the point of contact is, find out who's going to be taking the assessments, reach out to your dealer and say, here's your person to reach out to. If you have that, do that. Be proactive, be the hero. Because if you don't, accept that you are probably going to get canceled.
But here's the good thing about this. This gives you guys a real opportunity to go in and look who the fuck has access to your DMS, because so many of you grant things and then you fire people and you're like, oh, I fired them. They're going to remove themselves. They're not. Okay. I've got Google Analytics accounts going back 10 years from when I started my company. Okay. So people don't just cancel and get rid of it. So go and clean up your access points to your DMS. Tom Kline, I see you shaking your head. Is that what you're seeing? Is people taking advantage of this opportunity to go look through these things and take a second look?
Well, I haven't specifically seen that, Sean, but you're required, if your vendors aren't complying, you're required to replace them. The end. Now, there's some exceptions to the rule, although the law doesn't say there's an exception. But if your OEM isn't compliant, okay.
Also, you get rid of them, Tom. Right. But as April has pointed out to me, they're the ones that could give the shit least. Right. They're the ones who are just like, ooh, no, we don't think so. We are manufacturers. It'd be nice if you stayed in your fucking lane like that, but I know you won't. So now you don't want to get involved when you need to be involved. So service provider DMS. So who has access to a DMS? Well, a lot of people, including the aforementioned OEM. So that's funnel 1. April, who's funnel 2?
Funnel 2 is going to be the people, and this is where I kind of believe and fall into funnel 2, is by reading the verbiage. A service provider is any person or entity that receives, maintains, processes, or otherwise is permitted access to customer information through its provision of services directly to a dealership.
So every lead provider in the industry then.
Bingo.
There's just it's unquestioned. That is why the ADF format exists, is so that you can get the customer information from your site and you can transfer it to my site. Now, Tom Kline, you'll appreciate this joke, but if everyone's worried about encryption, we should just go back to faxing internet leads, because there was nothing more encrypted than a good fax back in the day, right?
It's
so
true.
That's but where does that fax land? Like, even in today's world, PI is considered. It is not just social security numbers.
No, it ends up in my finance office on the floor, April. On on a Monday morning, you come in, and all the leads from the weekend are on the floor.
Right. Yeah. So PI is basically is just a person's name. Honestly, that's enough. PI can just be a person's name.
Which your chat provider gets. I mean, if you want to look at it that way, if you have outsourced chat, they're getting information, right?
And remember, it's service leads too, right? Because a service lead, they're providing their email address and their cell phone number, which are considered PII. So,
right, and those are all access points into typically like funnels, right? So like the X times, you have to like log in and shit when you show up to a dealer's website. You have to do all that, but it's housed on our site. Even if it's a pass-through click, if you looked at the original person responsible, it would be my website. That's how the consumer got to that funnel. So, all right. So service provider, including service.
Funnel two. Yeah. So funnel two is kind of that dealer protection, so to speak, which means if you push if you have anything to do with any personal information with the dealership period, as far as sharing that information, whether I'm sharing it to you or you're sharing it to me, you fall in funnel two, which means, yes, you are a service provider. That's actually how I read it. I read funnel two. That's the way I interpret the words I just said.
Okay. And what's funnel three?
Funnel three is to actually say that it goes a step further, that these vendors are actually required to do this, fall under the same guidelines as the dealership, meaning that by osmosis, they actually have to hold their vendors accountable to the same high scrutiny that we are actually held responsible. So
anyone that they work with as a subsidiary of their business, maybe they're white labeling their marketing or they're doing something else, they need to hold that provider, right? This is getting into like a nasty game of telephone, right? Like you've got to deal with this guy. This guy's going to kick it down to, that was an outsourced company, not our fault, right? But that is their fault because they had to hold them responsible.
Bingo. So now, funnel two for me, like, I'm not saying like I don't care about funnel three, but to me, funnel three is the vendor's responsibility.
Why should I give a shit about funnel three? Like, I'm sorry, that is so someone else's problem. Like, we're trying to deal with our version of funnel three from a dealer perspective and the vendors we use, but to worry about the vendors you people use, pass. That is a hard pass. To Tom Kline's point, it's time to replace you if this is where we're at. But again, April, let's talk about replacement real fast because Tom brought it up. So how do I replace my OEM? How do I replace my CRM, my DMS? How does one go about this to know that the next guy's actually done it? And Tom, how many companies are calling you? That's what I want to know. How many actual vendors are reaching out to you for assistance versus dealers? Is it 10 to 1 dealers? Is it never been a vendor? Tom, how many people have reached out to you from a corporate perspective to get help with this?
I'd say 1 out of 8. So one vendor to every 8 dealers, something like that.
That number's backwards, folks. I got news for you. I don't know who's watching the show today, who's a vendor, who's not, but that number needs to be flipped on its head. Because if the vendors did what I asked them to do when Tom was first on this show a month and a half ago, and I told them to get their heads out of their asses and do whatever necessary to help their dealers, we wouldn't be here. April, how many countless hours to this point do you believe you've spent trying to reach people?
Okay. This has been an ongoing process for like 2 years within our group, right? Like you have a team together.
Because you've been ahead of it. You were dealing with the call side of it.
You have to do about that. All the things, right? So we've been, but if I want to just talk, so if I take out of it, not the hours spent on all of the other things over the last couple of years, but I talk just
Well,
this
30
vendor
days.
management piece, okay? Just this vendor management piece alone, I'm probably a solid 60 hours in. And the amount that are actually 100% complete, my completion percentage at this point is so low that the hours, if I took the percentage completion rate right now and then multiplied those hours that it would take me, this is now a full-time job for the next 2 years for me to actually hit a finish line.
Now, let me ask this. And Tom, you talked about this. Tom, do you believe this is for groups April size? So we're talking about, a 10 rooftop plus type group. Do you believe that a compliance officer is a full-time gig within those places?
I think I think it can be, yes. I mean, this all goes back, Sean, to how much risk the dealer is willing to take on, right?
Appetite for risk. Yeah.
If the dealer says, hey, and I've had dealers say this to me, I've got compliance tattooed on my neck and I don't need any more compliance. Like, whatever you need to do, but I'm not doing it with you. If that's your risk tolerance, then that's okay. I mean, I've talked to groups of 28, 30, 32 stores, and I've said, tell me about your compliance program. And they give me an answer. And I have one key question that I always ask, which is there any, for my risk purposes, is there anyone at the stores who are doing any activity at all, any compliance activity? And to me, if the answer is no, then I don't think that you have a compliance program, because a compliance is fine. Everybody says, well, look, I have all my written policies. If you're not following up and auditing behind those policies, then you really don't have a compliance program, because part of a compliance program is making sure you check behind them. Now, interestingly, Sean, and do you have a seat belt in that chair? Because you may fall out of it when I tell you this.
Oh, buddy, I don't, but let's go.
There's a Section 8 of the U.S. Criminal Code, which is what judges use to mete out whatever prison sentences there are. Section 8 specifically has judges take into account whether companies have a compliance program as a part of how long they get sentenced. So that's supposed to be one of the items that judges understand and look at before they do criminal sentencing. And if you don't think that happens, then IRS 8300, just to use that, the cash reporting, jail time of up to 5 years for not doing that right. So that's what's in the code. So this, compliance and auditing and all those things, if you don't want to do them, then that's fine. Just remember that Section 8 of the U.S. sentencing guidelines dictate that judges take that into consideration.
Which is why when we first talked, you said, Sean, the best thing I tell people to do is document. Is start somewhere. Start and act like you give a shit, right? And we can't all be fortunate to have April Simmons in our dealership, right? That's just not a thing. So the Horn Group, they know this. They're as lucky as it gets with someone like April. But April, as you sit here as someone who, you're not ownership, we know that, but you're not a store level personnel either. You're sort of in this middle mix. How does this go down for your group, to Tom's point, to a store level? What does this sound like, look like to you guys?
Well, so we, like I had previously mentioned, we devised a team within Horn Auto Group. So we have every area department-wise covered. So we have IT that's on our compliance team. We have ownership that's on our compliance team. We have a general manager that is on our compliance team, office. We have fixed ops. We cover every single area and we put them into a fixed ops team. And that team's job then is, as we determine each section, they have to then push that down into those teams in that area, right? Because ultimately, when if I was to run into service and say, you guys need to make sure, these ROs are always under lock and key and yada, does that go over as well as their direct manager saying, hey, this is our new plan, here's how we're going to do it, and we have to divide, because it has to go farther than that. It can't just be like, hey, Sean, you need to brush your teeth this morning. It needs to be, hey, Sean, you take the toothbrush out, you put the toothpaste on it like this, and this is how you do it. You have to have a plan that is more than just here's what we do, but how we do it. That is the important aspect.
Tom Kline, does that sound about right to you? Does that sound about what makes up a great compliance setup for a dealership group?
I'm going to say something a little off color. Is that all right?
Oh no, not on this show, Tom. We don't allow off color anything. You must be new to the show. We're very buttoned up, very straight laced situation.
Well,
Tom Kline, for God's sakes, give me it. What is it?
Your compliance program shouldn't be hope and poke.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
How's that?
That dude, hey, look, I'm with you. I'm with you. It should not be anything regarding hope as it relates to anything. And that's what I like about April and her team. They've devised a plan. They get it down to the store level. So as we sort of look, you've been great with your time. We're all fired up here. Let's wrap this up, as I like to do in these sort of things, with how we can help right now. So April, how can we help dealers right now with your 60 hours in, what you've learned, what you know? What can you tell dealers today, right now, that they can help them deal with this?
I think the biggest thing for the dealers is to itemize your plan of attack, understand that one person can't do it all. So you've got to figure out who is going to take what little piece of this, and then constantly get back together on that. My biggest reason for wanting to do this show with you guys today, though, is actually to speak not to the dealer, but to the vendor.
Well, that was next. The next question is, the dealers help. What can you tell the vendors to pull their heads from their asses and start to get to work on this topic?
And here's the thing, the people that, that are watching this, they may feel like they're not the decision maker in their group because they just work for, ABC company, but you're the ones that can really help. You're the ones that, if you're watching this, and you are at any level, at any type of company that works for a dealership, whether you're a bank, you're an OEM, you're a vendor of any sort, please ask your boss to find out whom is the person that is supposed to sign the contract, whom is the person who is going to take care of assessment, and proactively tell your dealer, hey, Mr. Dealer, this is who you need to reach out to. If I had just one vendor, I have not had one who has proactively reached out to me. So the amount of heavy lifting on your dealer partners right now to go through 9 layers deep of each and every single vendor we do business with is a heavy lift. It's an absolute heavy lift. Be the partner you claim to be, and put a plan in to help your dealers hit the finish line. Please.
Put your partnership where your mouth is, people. Like, I know we have a lot of great reps, and folks, we know a lot of reps watch this show. Please do what April was telling you. Be proactive, care, ask the question, and then tell your dealers, hey, just so you know, I've asked, we're on it. I don't care if you're an account manager. I don't care if you're a field rep. If you have a direct access to someone like an April Simmons or an internet director, internet manager, tell them, be there for these people, because it's hard enough in a dealership, okay? Day to day. This is not April's job, okay? April is running an organization's marketing, BDC. It's just a part. So listen, she's telling you from a dealer perspective. Tom Kline, from a corporate perspective, start with the dealer. What advice do you give them?
I got 5 or 6 items I'm going to roll through here, Sean.
Okay.
First of all, software, there are vendors in the space that say that their software is going to make you 100% compliant. It's not true.
Well, it's not even compliant, Tom. Their own software, as you've seen and pointed out to us, is not even compliant in its own space. It's like when GM launched Shop Click Drive, and they made a big deal about it. They didn't have secure credit app pages.
Exactly.
Like show up and there's a big X on the screen, like, don't use this. It's not trusted. And you're like, okie dokie, and they wonder why no one used it. All right.
I remember.
Yeah.
So
yes, you do, Tom.
Yes, I had to deal with it, right? So number one, software is not going to fix this problem.
More tech doesn't fix your problem.
Okay, that's number one. Number two, because the industry is structured on the ADF XML format, this is not going to be a quick fix. So if the vendors are listening, this is what I would do for your dealers. This is a good one. So I hope you're paying attention, because I've given this some thought. To address April's concerns, knowing that everything is based on the ADF XML format, send your dealer a monthly or quarterly, monthly's better, update as to what you're doing to fix this problem, so that all they have to do is take that memo and paste it into their software, or put it in a binder, or put it in a file, and they say, yep, I got an update, so that if the regulator walks in, they can pull out the memo and say, well, on this one, I got an update. On this one, I'm still working on it. But that way they know what's going on. Lack of communication, there's no excuse for lack of communication, which is April's whole point here, which is communicate with your dealer clients. And if you need help with that, call April, call me, call Sean, call anybody.
So when you talk about that though, Tom, do you foresee this? It seems like the only people that can be fined are dealerships.
Now,
Am I hearing this correctly? I mean, do you believe the vendors will be fined? Do you believe, how do you believe that part of the discussion will go?
well, it depends, two things. Number one, it depends on what your contract says with that vendor. So dealers, take a look and see if you are indemnifying that vendor. Then if you get hit with a fine and you try to sue your vendor, it's not going to go anywhere, because they're going to say, you've indemnified us for this. Now, I'm not a lawyer, as everybody knows, but you would certainly have an argument over that. So it really depends, number one, contractually, and number two, it depends on whether there's a data breach, and it depends on what level of insurance coverage that your vendor may have, which would respond to any lawsuit that the dealer may bring. So it's kind of a very complicated stew that depends on, a lot of different things.
Like most of this stuff. All right, that was number 3. What do you got for number 4?
Go through, when I was at my clients yesterday, I went through their information security program. And if you had one that the software has generated for you, go through it and make sure, and I've got probably 50 highlighted items on this ISP, make sure that that's actually what you're doing. It sounds very obvious, but if you haven't read your ISP, take out those parts. If you're not doing it, don't hang yourself by having a document that you've signed that you hand to the FTC, and they're going to say, oh, well, did you do this? And you're going to say,
yeah, it's like, well, Tom told us to document, so that's what we did. And they're like, no, you have to do the shit you talked about doing.
Right.
You can't just document shit and be like, yeah, we're all set here. Thanks a lot. Have a nice day. But no, it doesn't work that way.
So make sure that what you're looking at is actually what you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to hang yourself with your own document. So that's the next item.
Number 5.
Number 5, cyber insurance. Make sure you have a policy, because this is all about a cyber breach, right? That's really when this is going to come into play. Well, one of two things, actually. A cyber breach, number one, or if you have terrible customer complaints, that's when traditionally the FTC and the CFPB have come in to dealerships. I mean, you can look at Passport, and you've heard me say this before, Passport Automotive, Paul Blanco in California, Dan O'Brien Kia. Well, that was an attorney general issue. Napleton Automotive from last year. They all started with customer complaints. So,
that had nothing to do with data breaches. This was just a way that you were brought into the lens of the people looking at this sort of thing, right? That's what you're saying. You're talking about customer complaints, about service, about sales, about playing, whatever it is that in the car business we all deal with. April today probably woke up to 3 reviews and saw customers complaining or whatever. This is every day. That is, so it's like the guy who gets pulled over for drunk driving because his taillight's broken. Right?
Exactly.
It wasn't swerving, wasn't doing anything, but broken taillight. Now you're fucked.
Exactly.
So that's what this is. Wow, that's
and then
scary to think about.
And then I guess kind of the last thing is just a tip, which is you're not going to reinvent this. This isn't going to happen in one day. You can't sit down and just do it. And so my advice to both dealers and vendors alike is this is something you should spend 15 minutes on every single day until it gets handled, and do it first thing in the morning while you're fresh, while you have patience, because it's maddening. As April and I have had how many conversations, April, about this? I mean, Friday nights, Saturdays, whatever it is. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And so the only way to address a problem like this is first thing in the morning, spend 15 minutes so that you're working at your best. When your 15 minutes is up, go on to your next thing and do it every day, so that if somebody comes in and says, what are you doing? You can really say, here's my logs, here's what I work on. If you don't have a way to document that, what I have done in the past is I came up with what's called a report of discussion form, which is simply your logo, and it says report of discussion at the top, and it says who you spoke to. It's got blanks for who you spoke to, the time you spoke to them, and what they said. And it's that simple. And every time you make a phone call, you fill out a report of discussion, you put it in your file. Even if you just left a message, you put it in your file. So when somebody says, well, what did you do? You pull out your file and say, here's all the phone calls I made. Here's all the things I did to try to get this resolved. If you're
But be sure you're actually doing it, right, Tom? That was your first point, was if you're going to write it down, you're going to say you did it, make sure that you're actually doing it.
Exactly. Well, make sure you're writing down what it is that you're actually doing and signing what you're actually doing, and it goes back and forth. So that's
April, after hearing Tom's top 5 and tip at the end, anything you'd like to add to that from the dealer perspective?
I just really appreciate this conversation, because this is probably one of the heaviest lifts for a dealership, and let's just face it, Tom's made some points that just shine the light on the fact that dealers do what dealers do best. They sell cars, they service cars, they take care of customers. When you start to get into these other areas, they're like, well, I didn't go to college for this. So
I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a compliance guy. I don't, I'm glad I have Tom Kline on speed dial. That's how I feel about what I approach, right? And so you as a dealer, you've done the same. So here's what I'll tell everybody. Dealers, yes, you're responsible. Vendors, this is truly your problem. Whether it's dealers' responsibility or not, it is your problem to fix. To Tom Kline's point, the idea of switching out formatting of ADF, that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. Although April and I have talked about some opportunities that might exist for people to get encryption easier than they think. And so, the options are out there. But thank you to the both of you for taking time this morning to come out, talk about a topic that, frankly, if it weren't for the two of you, I would not be talking about this, because I do not have the patience. 15 minutes a day or not, Tom Kline, I do not have it. But to hear it from both perspectives has been really, really awesome. So thank you both. I really, really appreciate it.
glad to be here.
yes.
All right, everybody. That is fun with the FTC, which normally I don't think anybody here would actually say. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you.